Hello, everybody. Here it is, Mr. Miller here, and I am joined today with Becca Miller from Great Basin National Park. Hello, Becca.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So we met quite some time ago, actually, in Iowa, but you were no longer there. Can you tell us where you are now?
Sorry, could you repeat that? You broke up a little bit.
Sorry, I said when we met in Iowa, but now you are not in Iowa anymore. Can you tell me where you are?
Correct. Yeah, I am in the middle of the desert in Nevada at Great Basin National Park in this little town called Baker, Nevada.
Now, you sent me some pictures, and it does not look like the desert there.
Yeah, well, we do get a ton of snow in the wintertime. That's when we get most of our precipitation is in the form of snow. So it gets pretty cold, and that's because we're a high desert. So I live at about 7,000 feet, and it goes all the way up to over 13,000 in this park. So it's pretty wet in the wintertime, but in the summer it does get to be like 100, 110 in the valleys.
That is sounds less than ideal. So maybe I think the thing that makes the most sense to start with is maybe if you just kind of tell us what a ranger does and maybe what kind of rangers there are, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, definitely, sure. So I am an interpretive park ranger. So when you hear somebody say, I'm a park ranger, they could have like one of a dozen or more jobs. Pretty much, national parks are like isolated cities, pretty much. So you have everybody who does everything. So we have maintenance rangers, and they go around, they clean like bathrooms, and they do the garbage stuff. So we have people who maintain the facilities that way. We also have law enforcement rangers, and they're the park rangers that you see that have guns on their hips. So they're pretty much like the cops for the parks. They patrol the areas, make sure everything's safe for everybody who's visiting, and they also protect the resource. So they're super important. They're also usually our first line of medical. Like if somebody calls 911 in the park, they're the people who are going to show up to help them out. So we have law enforcement, maintenance. I'm interpretive. So whenever you hear somebody say that they're an interpretive park ranger, I personally think it's the most fun ranger to be. That's why I'm one. So we get to do programs. Whenever you go see a ranger talk, like evening programs are like a quintessential thing about going to a national park. You go to a campfire program and there's a ranger up there telling stories or talking about something in the park, they're the interpretive ranger. So I have always done that, working with the park, interpretation, and we get to hike around. It's called roving, which is a pretty sweet part of my day, where I'll just walk around on the trails and run into people, and people inevitably have questions for rangers because you're curious about what you're looking at. So you just walk around, make sure everybody's doing all right. You do informal interpretation that way. We also have fee rangers, so people have to pay to camp. A lot of these parks you have to pay to get in. There's a little entrance fee. And here at this park, we have a cave, and we do tours of the cave. So that's interpretation, but we also have to take in money for those tours. So somebody's got to count all of it, and send it off to the federal government where it gets dispersed back to all the national parks. So you got to have fee rangers. I feel like I'm missing some important ones. Oh yeah, we also have resource management, and that's a whole another group of rangers. And their job is to take care of all of our assets, all of our resources in the park. So there will be people who work just with cave life, and their job is just to keep our cave healthy and safe. And there are people here who work exclusively with some of our endangered species in the park, like the Bonneville cutthroat trout. We just reintroduced that. We have people here who monitor the mountain lion population in the park, the elk population. So it really takes a whole city of rangers to support a park, even a small one like Great Basin.
Thank you.
So yeah, when somebody tells you they're a park ranger, just know that there's like a whole.
That's great. What kind of park ranger are you? Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So students who've watched the show before may realize that normally we have another video feed here. This time we have a picture. Part of that is probably due to you being at a park, right?
Yes.
Rumor has it that the trees don't have Wi-Fi.
They definitely don't. And actually, cell phone reception in the valley that I live in is relatively new. They only put the tower in 4 years ago. So that's definitely something you run into in national parks where you're living and working in one, is that you're often in very remote areas. So yeah, I do not have internet.
Well, that is a deal breaker for our students because they literally work over the internet. But that's interesting. You said that. So you don't have internet. You've just gotten cell phone service. What do you do to communicate when you're out on one of these roves? Is it okay to call it a rove? That sounds weird. When you're roving, maybe.
Roving, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It sounds like a video game term.
It does.
But
how do you communicate back if you see something that you need, or if you need some sort of assistance?
Yeah, sure. And that's like one of the cardinal rules about being a park ranger. When you're out in the general public, you're the first point of contact for people. So if somebody breaks an ankle and they're on the trail and they see you, you have to be able to get a hold of somebody. And cell phone service doesn't really happen in the park either because we're so far away from the tower. So we all carry these really juiced up radios, and we have a couple of repeater stations, which is where the signal goes and then it gets rebounded. But our dispatch is actually about 5 hours away by car at Lake Mead. So whenever we get on our radio, it goes all the way to Lake Mead and here. Yeah, but that's how we keep in touch in the park. All of our vehicles have radios, but when you see a ranger out in the field, you're probably seeing them with a big old radio attached to their belt.
Fair enough. So CB had asked some questions, one of which was what different jobs or roles that there at the park, and you've already knocked that one out of the park. Oh, that was awful. I'm sorry. That was not what I meant to do. I'm going to apologize for everyone because I'm already the math teacher, so I'm already a little dorky, and that just hurts me with my students. That hurts my rapport right there. So let's go on maybe to ask what sort of, they asked, what sort of hours do you work? What sort of days do you work?
Yeah. So personally, everybody's different in the parks, but since I'm an interpretive and a fee ranger, I need to be here when everybody comes. So I work holidays and I work weekends. That's not true for everybody, but since I interact with visitors, I need to work over the weekend. So my days off are Monday and Tuesday, every other Wednesday. So I work 9-hour days. I show up at the visitor center about an hour before we open so I can get everything ready, open the cave, open the cabin, historic cabin that we have. So I work 9-hour days, except for one 8-hour day during the week. So kind of nice because we get that 3-day weekend every other week, and since we're so remote, we kind of need that to go grocery shopping.
That makes sense. Can I divert a little bit and talk about caves, because that's something that interests me personally. I don't know if it interests the students, but
oh yeah, definitely.
So here we have some caverns that were used by the Native Americans as living quarters. I'm in Delaware, so for my students who don't know, and for the parents who are joining me for the first time, I'm located in Delaware. All of our teachers, all of our staff are located across the state. And I've been through those, and those have been very interesting to me. One thing that they were very clear about was that every time that you touch the cave, it changes the way that the cave grows, right? Like the ceiling, the parts that are still alive. So I guess if I were a student, my first question would be, how can a cave be alive?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we use the term active and dormant.
Okay,
so
you guys use different...
Let's say hypothetically. Yeah, so we call it active and dormant, but we do call it like it's an alive cave because it'll be actively forming. So let's just say we have a hypothetical cave with a bunch of speleothems or decorations, so like stalactites, stalagmites, all the pretty stuff inside caves. And of course, they look really pretty, and our natural human instinct is to touch them. But if they're forming, actively forming, so if there's water dripping on these structures, that is how they grow. And we, as humans, have oil on our hands. So whenever we touch a formation, the oil is going to degrade the actual rock. And also, what do you know about oil and water?
They mix really well, right?
Yes,
No.
exactly. So wherever you touch a formation, water is no longer going to be able to deposit on that spot because it's going to go right around it because oil and water don't mix. So that's why we ask that you don't touch anything, because effectively you're killing, we do say that you're killing a structure when you touch it, because wherever you put your little fingers, it's never going to grow there again. So interesting thing about caves, though, is that if you touch a structure that looks like it's dormant or dead, it could just be dead for right now. As long as water can end up back there again, it could become active again. So not touching anything in a cave is what we ask all of our visitors.
So, water, if it were just pure water, if it were like distilled water, just H2O in the bottle, that wouldn't make the cave grow, right? Is there something in the water
Correct.
that makes it grow?
Yeah, there is. Yes. So most of these caves, I guess Iowa, I grew up in Iowa, and so we had karst topography, which pretty much talked about the landscape that has limestone and marble and sinkholes and all these beautiful rivers, because limestone's carved away pretty easy. So where you find speleothems, or these decorations, they're going to be in caves that are karst topography. So water falls on the surface and it percolates through the soil as it goes down, and just like you make coffee, water picks up the coffee and then it becomes a liquid coffee. It does the same thing, except it's picking up carbon dioxide instead, and that makes it a really weak acid called carbonic acid. And as that acid goes through the soil, it dissolves some of the rock, and then it becomes carbonic. And so there is carbon and there is calcium in it now. So it's a solution, a droplet of solution. And as it comes into the cave, when it's exposed to air, the carbon dioxide leaves the solution just the same way it does when you open a soda can. Carbon dioxide leaves. And then what's left is this calcium, this calcite mineral that is desperate to do something with itself. So it just attaches to whatever is there, and that is how cave formations happen. It's just one tiny little drop at a time.
Super cool. I hope John is actually paying it. John is our science teacher. I hope Mr. W is listening in. I'm sure he might have other questions for us. As we go along, if you are watching the show live, then you can feel free to tweet at TRECAtv with any questions you might have for us. It's up on the very top right there. If you are not watching this live, you can't. That's how that works. But if you have questions after the show, I'm sure if you send them my way, I can forward them along. Maybe we can get them answered afterwards as well. So again, thank you for joining us. It is you're in Nevada, which is quite away from here. Can I ask a little bit about how you became a park ranger? How does one become a ranger? Is it something where you can, okay, I've got my high school degree, I can go in and help, or is it something that's a more involved process?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot because people are really interested in becoming rangers. And the really interesting thing, if you go to a national park and you ask a ranger, any ranger, you just ask them, how did you become a ranger? I guarantee you're going to get a different story every time. There are so many ways to become a ranger. The only one that you need special schooling for is to be a law enforcement ranger. They actually have an academy that's like 2 months long, and then you get placed into a job after that if you ranked high enough in your class. But if you want to do something like interpretation or work in resources on the more science side of things, across the board, you need a 4-year degree. So you need some sort of degree higher than a 2-year, like associates. You need a bachelor's degree at least. And more schooling means that when you're done and you apply for a Park Service job, you're going to get paid more. So if you have a master's degree, you can get kind of stuck into the system as a beginner at a higher pay grade. But as far as getting into the federal service, being a civil servant for the National Park Service, it's very, very competitive. And the way that you can kind of break that wall is to volunteer. And it's really easy. Parks are amazing at catering to their volunteers. They typically give you a place to live for free. And then most of them give you like a $15 a day stipend so you can pay for food and maybe cover one bill a month with that saved up money. But that's just kind of that's how you have to get into it, because it's so easy to apply for National Park Service jobs anymore because it's all online at usajobs.gov. But you're competing with like 1,000 other people for one position, and it's really hard to stick out as a good candidate unless you have previous experience and references from other National Park Service workers. So you kind of need to get your foot in the door a little bit before you can get the job. But that being said, I've worked with interpretive park rangers who are fantastic at their job, and they studied accounting in college. And they were accountants before they decided that, hey, I'd rather just live in national parks and work for the federal government. So
fair enough.
My advice is just do what you love, and whatever trips your trigger. And if you want to work for the National Park Service, there are ways to do it, even if you aren't like a geology nut or a biology nut. If you love it, there are ways to do the job.
Were you a geology or biology nut going through school?
Yes, I did study biology. I bounced around a lot. I changed my major a ton, but I focused in chemistry, psychology, and biology. And I wish I would have taken a geology course, that's for sure. But it's definitely helped me in my role as an interpreter, because when I say interpreter, when you usually hear that word, you think somebody who's interpreting languages,
right,
like somebody who's taking French and turning it into English. But really what we're doing is interpreting nature for visitors and trying to give them a meaningful connection with the landscape through knowledge. So it helps. It really does help to know what you're looking at. So it helps to study science and to have a general base in that, but you don't need it.
Fair enough. Thank you. So what I'm hearing is, just to kind of summarize, that for the interpretive park rangers, for the other park rangers that do the science sort of aspects of things, you will need a 4-year degree. For law enforcement, correct, there is an academy, and you go in and you must do pretty well, and then you'll get placed into a park. And for the other roles, it is more competitive. It is competitive, but more based on things that make you stand out. So doing things like volunteering, becoming active, would give you a leg up.
Definitely, yeah. And the National Park Service is a really small world. So, I mean, I volunteered at Effigy Mounds National Monument, which was 45 minutes away from my house in Decorah, Iowa, where I grew up. And I spent a summer there working with the biological team and with trail maintenance. And I work with people now. This is 10 years later. I work with people who know some of the people that I worked with. So it's a small community. And once you get your foot in the door and make yourself kind of known in the community, it really works in your benefit. So yeah, doing extra stuff that kind of shows that you really do love working in nature and working to protect nature, that all looks really good on a resume.
I appreciate that. That clearly was not my path. I started as computer science, which is basically like staying up until 4 a.m. programming computers. So it's the exact opposite of nature, and then ended up in math. But that's one thing I'm going to pass out to my students, is that there is no magic time where you're like, I know what I want to do with my life. Everything's figured out. As you go into, if you choose to go into college, if you choose to find work after high school, whatever path you choose to take, there will always be times where you think, you know what, I'm interested in different things. This is something that I would like to do. This is something I'd like to try. And volunteering, on top of doing good for your town, doing good for your city, doing good for, whatever location you're in, the other thing you can do is you can get an idea of, this is something I'm really happy doing, and this is something that, I would be happy to do for 20 years, especially if they're paying me to do it. And that's important, to find a place that you enjoy being at the end of the day. So it sounds like you've done that a little bit.
Yeah, I got the chance to, well, when I was in high school, I had this awesome ecology teacher, and he hooked me up with this group called the Student Conservation Association. It's called SCA for short. And as a high schooler, you can apply to do trail work through the SCA. It's all volunteer, and I think the only thing you pay for is your flight and your gear, like boots and a backpack and just simple stuff. But I did that for 2 summers, and I went out for 30 days at a time and got to do trail work in some beautiful places. Like my first assignment was in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, and then my second assignment was in Soldotna, Alaska, and I was building trail up there. So that really tuned me into wanting to be a supporter of wild areas. So yeah, volunteering played a huge role in shaping where I'm at right now. And volunteering not only gives you the experience, but it also lets you see people who are really good at their job do their job, and they impart knowledge to you. It's great. I wish I would have done more volunteering when I was younger, to be honest. I feel like I could have learned a lot more, but I got some in. Yeah.
I'll second that. A lot of my stuff is not, like, a lot of my activities were never, I did like math events and those kinds of things. So I guess this is where I was going to end up. But that would have, being able to go and explore the different wildlife that exist, because the United States is a very varied place, right? We have a lot of square mileage here, which is very different than, our states are as big as countries are in Europe. Like this is a big place. And so when we look at something like this park in Nevada that is a desert that is fueled by snow, that its plant life is fueled by snow mostly, versus the Blue Ridge Mountains versus Pipestem State Park in West Virginia, or Watauga State Park, some of these different places. Those are the ones I know because that's the ones we visited when I was a kid over in West Virginia. Each of these environments is different. Do you think that that as a park ranger it'd be important to match a certain environment, or do you think that you would be happy regardless of what area of the country you were in?
Yeah, so this is a topic of conversation amongst rangers because we bounce around a lot, especially when you're first starting out. You're what you call a seasonal ranger. That's like the entry position. And what you end up getting, your first assignment, your first job, is probably going to be something that is what we call a 1039 position. So it's 1 hour less than 6 months long. So you get to go to typically a different part of the country than you're at the time. And what I've learned and what I've gleaned from bouncing around the country doing this job is that there are 2 different kinds of parks. There are historic parks. There are a lot of those on the East Coast. And there are a lot of nature-related parks, which are more condensed in the western part of our country. And you're kind of one or the other as far as what you want to do, because there are park rangers who really get excited about history and park rangers that get really excited about natural things. So I think that's probably the only real difference. But otherwise, the great thing about being a ranger is that you go to a new spot and you get to learn all about that spot, that whole new environment that you might not have ever been in. So all the rangers that I know are people who love to learn and who are curious people. So we just gobble up information as we get it. So my previous job was in Sequoia National Park, which was also mountainous, but a very, very different environment. And now that I'm in the desert, I've never lived in the desert before. I appreciate it for what it is. So I personally have no preference. I'm a nature ranger, though. I definitely prefer natural parks over the historical ones. Not to say that those aren't wonderful as well, but that's just me personally. So
I'm going to pull up a picture too from Sequoia for some of the trees, because those are just about incredible.
Oh, they're insane.
So it's going to take me a second because I got to change my look here. So it's a picture of appears to be a hiker, and I'm not doing a good job of it. You can't see the stream, but I'm floundering here. Okay. So this is a hiker standing in front of just a huge forest of trees. Just huge trees. And I have no idea if you'd be able to just like pick out which one I'm talking about.
Yep. Yeah, I think I remember sending you that one. Sequoia trees sometimes grow in these groupings. They're kind of rare to grow like that because they need such immense amounts of resources. But what you're looking at, I think that's a picture of the Congress group in Sequoia National Park in the giant forest. So yeah, that those are like average sized mature sequoia trees. They're probably 2,000 plus years old. They can get a lot bigger around than that. But yeah, sequoia trees are incredibly massive.
I'm going to pull up, if it's okay, the General Sherman, apparently.
Yes, General Sherman is the world's largest tree by volume. So there are a lot of different ways to say largest tree in the world. We have the tallest tree in the world, which is a redwood in California, Hyperion. And General Sherman, it has the most space. So it occupies the most space as a single organism. So there are clonal trees that occupy more space because they share a root system. But this is the largest single living organism on the face of the planet.
And if you are in my course or one of the other high school courses, I do expect you to know what she means by volume. For our younger people, area is length times width times height. So when it's a 3D shape, that's volume. Like how much water is in a cup, that's volume. And so you've sent me one here that compares a space shuttle to the Statue of Liberty. Is it okay for me to pull that one up?
Yeah.
All right. Because and again, unfortunately, because she doesn't have the ability to see what we're looking at, that may make it harder for her sometimes to comment on what we're doing on the screen. So if things are a little disjointed, ladies and gentlemen, we're doing the best we can. So we've got the space shuttle, the redwood, the sequoia, a person, which I honestly thought was just a tick, but it's not. Apparently that's a person. A blue whale, and the Statue of Liberty. So it looks like the General Sherman, or the sequoia, can grow to be about the size of the Statue of Liberty.
Right, and the tree on that little postcard thing is that General Sherman. So they can actually get taller than General Sherman. He's only, I think, 276 feet tall, but they can grow. I think the tallest one they've found is in Sequoia National Park, and it's around 307 feet tall, I believe.
That might be this one. It looks to be
about
the 300 mark. I will tell you that
300?
It looks very close to 300. I will tell you that I've seen the Statue of Liberty, and that is terrifying that a living organism can get that big. That is absolutely terrifying. The Statue of Liberty is awe-inspiring, so that is amazing. Yeah,
these trees are so huge that their branches are the size of regular trees. Like a branch fell off of General Sherman in the 70s, and the circumference of that branch is bigger than any tree east of it. So any other tree in the United States east of the Sierra Nevada mountains has a smaller circumference than the branch that fell off of General Sherman.
That is terrifying. Very cool. So, and I have not had the luxury of seeing the redwoods or the sequoias in person. For the most part, I've been on the East Coast with the exception of, I mean, I guess you would call Iowa and Missouri the Midwest, but we don't have trees like that here. We genuinely don't. That's not something. So to try to wrap your mind around it, to try to get an idea, like that tree like a room could fit in the trunk of that, right? Like you could carve out a living room in there.
Mm-hmm.
That's just
Yeah, you definitely could. And pioneers used to do that. I mean, back in the 1800s when these trees were discovered, they logged, of course, and people would take sections of sequoia trees, hollow them out, and then put like a legit house roof on top, and they would have these little tree houses. But yeah, they're immensely huge, and it is hard to grasp how big they are unless you see them in person. But it would take dozens of people to wrap their arms around, holding hands to wrap around one of these trees. Like diameter, the largest point on the General Sherman across is 36 feet, which if you plop that in the middle of a highway, it would block 3 lanes of traffic.
That is incredible.
Yeah, they're huge tree.
It looks like from some of the pictures you sent me, it's not just plant life that you deal with. So bears or macaws? Where are we going? Is that a macaw?
Bears and macaws. Yeah, the macaw. The macaw was in a campground. So I was walking around the campground advertising for my evening program about fire ecology, and that's how you get people to come to your programs, is to go tell them. And of course, they want to come see a ranger talk about fire. Everybody loves fire. So that was one of the times I was walking. I was walking around, and somebody had brought their pet macaw on vacation, and so I was like, "Yeah, I have to get a picture of me with this macaw."
Okay.
So that's not native wildlife. You can see there's a little leash attached to his little foot, so not native. But the bears are native in California, in Sequoia National Park, and that's another type of ranger. We had bear management rangers, and their job was to take care of a lot of the wildlife. Like if they had a chance to dart a mountain lion, they totally would do that. But the bear population in parks are typically pretty stressed because they want to eat human food, and humans like to feed bears, which you should never do. But bears will.
Are you like really solid on that? Is that like a hard and fast rule, or is that a little bendable?
What?
Don't feed the bears. I'm just picking.
Oh no, yeah, 100% don't feed the bears, because then they remember next time they see a person, I could probably get a PB&J off of that guy, and then they get more bold, which makes them dangerous. And one of our sayings is that a fed bear is a dead bear, because we do only give them 3 strikes. So we'll try and catch them 3 times, and then we haze them. So whenever we let them out, we'll dart them, we'll tranquilize them. And there's a picture of me with a sleeping bear. He looks dead, but he's just sleeping. This was a problem bear 2 years ago, and
what sort of bear is that?
Him. That's a black bear.
Okay.
That's a little black bear. That's a yearling, so he's not that old, maybe a year and a half.
Okay.
But we would dart him, and I got to volunteer with these guys, but we would dart him and take their measurements and then let them go. And then on the 3rd time, we do have to put them down. So just remember that whenever you're around wild animals, it's better not to feed them, because bad things can happen if they get used to human food.
But I mean, if a park ranger's got to choose between a kid and a bear, they're going to choose the kid. But that's not. I mean, you know.
Yeah, well, it's tough, because visitor safety is obviously paramount to us. We don't want anybody coming to the park and getting hurt.
Right.
But we also want to protect our bears. So it's really just education. We just want to let people know to let wildlife be wild, keep a safe distance, because black bears are super curious, and they're really like giant raccoons. They're very scarable. Like, the way you handle a black bear is you just look him right in the eyes and you clap your hands at it, and you just literally yell, "Hey, bear." It'll probably look at you and run away. They're very scared, timid animals. But if they know you have a granola bar in your backpack and they've had one before, they will get closer than they should.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
We black bears I'm more familiar with. One of our state parks in West Virginia is they have been they had a breeding program or I don't know if it's a breeding program as much as they're just sustaining the numbers and the population and, working closely on black bears specifically. And we ran into one biking up there, and it was the scariest thing in the world.
Oh.
Yeah.
What happened? Tell me. What'd you do?
Okay. So, it's like the least exciting story ever, but it sounds like it's going to be exciting and then it dies off, so just as a warning. So we were riding it's, I don't know what the state park is called. We always called it the Cranberry Backcountry, so I don't know. Maybe it's Cranberry State Park or something. And we were riding our bikes, and we were going down a trail, and we heard a rustle on the left. And we heard all these branches snapping, and we stopped our bikes, and we turned, and we watched as this little bear fell out of the tree. And we're like, wow, bears are a lot smaller than we thought they are. And then we heard a growl on the right, and we turned to the right, and there was the mother of the bear. And we were like, oh, we are not going to live anymore. This is it for us. We're all toast. So we put our bikes over sideways because we thought if we got back on them, and then we just backed up and walked away, and found our parents who were walking on the trails like reasonable human beings instead of riding their bikes, and did not get eaten by bears. Apparently, these bears had seen enough humans that she did not immediately charge us or anything. We were between. We weren't directly between, but we were pretty much in between her and her cub. And then basically the story ends with my brothers made it back to the bike before I did, and then they ate all the snacks out of the back of my bike and pretended like the bears did it for a week. So, because my brothers are jerks. If you were watching the show today and there's anything you need to remember, it's that my brothers are jerks, and you can just tell them I said it. It's fine. I like my snacks. Clearly, look at me.
As a side note, that rule about being in between, you never want to get in between a mama bear and its cubs, right? Everybody's heard that. Everybody knows that. But with black bears, that's actually not true.
Oh, well, that explains a lot.
Bears, yeah, it's only true with grizzly bears, with brown bears. It has to do with how they handle their cubs. So baby grizzly bear cubs have no way of climbing trees. And that's how black bears protect their young. So if you were to you said you saw the baby bear fall out of a tree?
Yeah, it was sliding out of the branches trying to climb. And it fell out.
So right before you showed up, I'm sure mama heard you, and they make this really weird grunting noise. And when their cubs hear that, they climb right up the tree, and they have really long, sharp claws. And so they climb right up the tree, and they hang down and look at you. It's really cute. But black bears can do that, and the mama will just walk away 30 yards and just sit down and look at you, and she knows that her baby bears are safe. But brown bears don't have the right kind of claws to do that, so the only thing to protect baby bear cubs that are grizzly bears is mom's attitude. So that's why grizzly bears are more aggressive, and that's why you definitely never want to be in between a mama bear and its cubs if it's a grizzly bear. But black bears, not as big of a worry.
Okay, can I ask you a question about grizzlies that you may or may not know the answer to?
Sure.
Okay, so I apologize because for anyone who's watching this, basically when we come in, I say, hey, I'm going to ask you, I had a question to ask, I had a student ask you, what kind of jobs there were at the park, so kind of know that that's coming. And then sometimes you just get into things and things pop up on the top of my head, and she gets blindsided entirely. So apologies. Sometimes they get off on awesome tangents, like learning that you can actually get between a black bear cub and the mother without dying. That's good information. I mean, either way, you're probably going to walk away, right? That would be my suggestion, and not hang out there. But so what I had heard was that if you're using the rule for a distinct species being that the species can't interbreed, or that if they do, they produce sterile offspring, that polar bears and grizzly bears can interbreed, and that the children are not sterile. And I'm trying to confirm this because this was secondhand from a student who had been in a biology lecture from the school that's near me, and I want to know if this is true. I guess I could Google it.
I've heard that, but that means there's a new species of bear out there. It'd be a hybrid, right?
Okay.
And I have not seen a picture or heard anything more than that, so I cannot accurately answer your question. I apologize.
Okay, I'm going to Google it, guys, which is, for the record, when finding information is an interesting thing. So when we were kids, for instance, when we were going through math classes, people told us you need to memorize all of these formulas because you will never have a calculator in your pocket. They were wrong.
Right?
They were so wrong. Our teachers could not have been more wrong. And so, that's some of my hesitation walking into a math class is tell us you need to memorize all these things because you're not going to have, well, you do. You have access to the internet. Somewhere on the internet, most formulas are going to be there. They're going to walk you through step by step how to do it. So part of moving forward, it's my belief maybe that it's more important to be able to understand information, to be able to dissect it, to be able to think critically about what's going on. And part of that is being able to find good information. So apparently
definitely.
they have... Go ahead.
I run into that every day as a ranger, and because people have crazy questions. Like, I did a marmot talk in Sequoia because I love yellow-bellied marmots. I think they're the cutest animals. And I got the craziest questions, like how many calories per ounce in their breast milk. Like, am I going to know that? So I learned...
Who asked you that? Was that a kid or an adult?
It was an adult.
Okay.
It was a woman who had a baby. So she was like, I was thinking about
She was
babies.
just like, this is just like what's on her head right now. This is what I'm doing.
Exactly. And you run into all sorts of people when you're talking to the general public, and the best rangers that I know, the people that I admire the most, are rangers who don't make up information, but it's okay to not know something because then you learn something. You'll go back and look up in a book or look on the internet and you learn something new. So not knowing the answer to a question is actually sometimes the best part of my day because then I get to learn something new and it's usually very interesting. So yeah, knowing how to look up information and decide if it's accurate or not, or if it's a verified source, credible source, that's more important than knowing everything.
Yeah, you'll never know everything.
It's impossible to know everything.
Absolutely.
It's impossible.
Okay, so I am seeing things from places like The Guardian, Scientific Nordic, Washington Post, USA Today, so some semi-reliable, reliable sources, and I brought a picture up on the screen, and it basically looks like a washed-out grizzly bear. Like, it's got the grizzly bear features, but it's like almost white, not quite, it's like a light tan. Very interesting looking.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so some of the pictures look very different. Let me see if I can... a lot of these are being tranked. Some of these have more polar bear type faces with the elongated snouts and that sort of thing. I don't know a good way of describing it. I'm just going to bring it up. Here we go. So these are two different versions. This one looking more like a kind of a light grizzly bear, and this looking more like kind of a dark polar bear. So apparently they can at least breed together and produce whatever this is.
Interesting.
So okay, cool. So that is random stuff. That I apologize, is a complete side, but great. Speaking of blindsiding, I'm going to go ahead and blindside with the other student question just to get it out of the way. That
great.
Yeah. So I apologize, which is from KT.
Oh no.
And I think this is mostly just to throw you off, which is how much of pi do you know? How far can you use pi?
I have 3.1415, I believe, but
Okay.
I was listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson's Star Talk podcast the other day, and he was talking about pi, and he's like, "Oh, this is a measure of how smart somebody is. Like, how many digits of pi do you know?" And Neil deGrasse Tyson was like, "You're going to always have access to that number. You don't need to memorize it." So back to our conversation about using your resources rather than memorizing numbers. There you go. Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he knows all, right?
He's got to be a pretty smart guy if he agrees with us. I'm sure that's the way the level of importance goes. It's us, and then slightly down, he's a pretty credible source. So I'm going to go through, and I want to take a look at some of the Great Basin picks.
Sure.
I'm going to bring up one with where you're swearing in a junior ranger, if that's okay.
Yes, I love that part of my job.
So what is a junior ranger? Because I don't know if my parents just didn't love me enough to take me out to do this, or what's going on, but it seems pretty awesome.
It's great. So I remember being a junior ranger when I was a kid, and that is the moment I was at a junior ranger program where we got sworn in, and I remember looking at that ranger and going, that is the coolest job. I want to do that. So I remember that when I was 8, becoming a junior ranger. But it's a free program, and whenever you go to a national park or a national monument, they'll probably have this free, really fun program, and they have little booklets at every site. So there's a junior ranger booklet that you pick up at the Great Basin Visitor Center, and it's like an activity book where you have to do X number of activities depending on your age, and it's fun stuff. Our park is really heavy on cave and bristlecone pines, and also the night sky, because that's what people come here to see for the most part. So it's whatever best resource a park has, you'll probably learn about it. So basically, it's a little free program. It's a booklet that might take you 20 minutes to a couple hours, depending on how hard it is. But you learn about the park, and you get to do fun activities. And then at the end, when you're done with your book, you bring it back to the ranger, and we go over the answers, and we'll ask questions and see what you learned and what you like and what you love about the park, all that stuff. And then you have to take the official government pledge, and then you get a little badge that says the name of the park that you're at, and you can collect them, which is pretty sweet. And some parks have really cool, above and beyond junior park ranger things, so you can get special edition badges and patches that you can't buy. You have to earn them. So it's a sweet program, and
patch.
I do it. Do you?
I do. And I remember a bunch of, and the other thing I remember is then becoming a fan of Ranger Rick. I don't remember anything about, I just remember a magazine.
Ranger Rick.
A magazine, apparently.
Yeah, it was Ranger Rick was like a raccoon, right?
Yeah, totally. Totally. Yeah. I don't know what it is. I hope it's school appropriate. I assume it is.
Yes. That was a magazine about nature stuff that they were always in dentist office and things like that.
Yeah, it's probably some grandmother sent it to me then. One of my grandmothers. You had mentioned the bristlecone pines, and I'll pull up a picture there. So what is interesting about these sorts of trees? He says, clearly setting you up.
Bristlecone pines are incredible trees. So there are 3 different species of bristlecone pine trees in the United States. They're native to the Americas, but the Great Basin bristlecone pine is the oldest living tree on the face of the planet. They just found one that's over 5,000 years old, and that one lives in the eastern part of the Sierra Nevadas, right before it drops off into the desert of Nevada. But we have bristlecone pines here in this park, and they're really special because, as you can see from that picture, if you have it pulled up, they look super gnarled, and they don't really get that big because they live and they thrive in these areas that are really crazy difficult to live. No soil. It's all just rocks. They live up on the tops of these mountains above 10,000 feet.
That's a rough-looking tree.
And that's because what you're looking at, the rough parts, those are dead parts of the tree. When it gets enough damage in one part of the tree, in a limb, it will cut off resources to that part of itself, and then it'll grow more branches on another side. So they end up looking super gnarled and snarly and beautiful. And People come here just to see them because they're one of the biggest and best, oldest trees. People go to Sequoia to see the biggest trees.
Right.
Kind of like the hyperbole nature items.
Yeah. You want to see the biggest and the best. Nothing in between.
You do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and then you had also spoken about the caves. I'm going to pull up a picture of you. Looks like you got your helmet on. You've got some measuring tools and cataloging cave life and taking cave measurements.
Yeah. So that was okay. So little segue before I talk about that.
Okay.
The reason why I love my job, the reason why being a park ranger is the coolest job in the world, because you get to live and you get to work with people who are also really passionate about their job. So on my days off, I get to volunteer with the other departments, and I get to help them out and protect our resources and also learn. So I've gotten to volunteer with a lot of different groups of people doing a lot of different things, and that is so cool to be able to just slip into another job for a day and do meaningful scientific research just with your free time. I think that's so cool. So yeah, the picture as we're cataloging cave life, we'll do that 4 times a year. We'll go into the cave, we look for these tiny little invertebrates that live in the cave, and we'll bait them with peanut butter to see if we can get more to show up, count them, and then catalog what we find. And sometimes you find a whole new species. In caves, it's very common to find species that don't exist anywhere else in the world except for that one cave. So yeah, that was something that I got to do the other day.
And peanut butter.
We also did lynx and peanut butter. I know, right? Rancid peanut butter. Woof, it stinks, but the little bugs love it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That is awesome. So, and you literally, you like your job so much, you do it but different on your days off too.
I do, yes. And it works that way because there are so many different awesome things you can do in the Park Service. And once you're in and you have a job, they love having you come on extra projects if you have the time and are able to. It's just a wonderful sense of community, and everybody wants to learn. And if you're a curious person, and if you like learning and you like learning new things and doing a lot of different kinds of things, being a ranger could be for you, because I get bored if I do the same thing over and over. Like, stick me in a room with a computer and my soul dies a little bit every day when I go into a job like that.
That is
but
what I do.
When I get to
it is up to the students to make my life interesting, and they work hard to do that. One way or another. Either, well, I won't get into that because some of them may be listening, but students make the work worthwhile most of the time.
Good.
I'm gonna. You had mentioned also, and I apologize because I'm kind of flipping through, but you had also mentioned the night skies, and I thought I would bring up one of those pictures because it is pretty incredible.
Yeah. So, national parks try to talk about a couple of common themes, and we talk about pollution, right? Because you go to national parks to get away from pollution. You get away from city smog. You also get away from noise pollution, which you don't really think about. But when you're in nature and all you hear are natural sounds, you realize how much noise pollution you have in your everyday life, like airplanes flying overhead or cars outside your window. People make noise. So, yeah, noise pollution. And also another really big one that we're noticing huge effects on biological cycles of all sorts is light pollution. And Great Basin is really cool because we are so incredibly remote. We don't have a whole lot of light pollution. Like, the closest thing is Vegas, and that's about a 5-hour drive from here, and that's the biggest source of light pollution for us. But our skies are so dark that people literally travel from other parts of the country. Like, I just talked to a woman from Wisconsin the other day who's coming to Great Basin to visit just to see the stars. So the less light pollution you have, the easier it is to see what's in front of you. So all you need is really a pair of binoculars. You don't need a really high-powered telescope to see really cool stuff. So the lack of the light pollution around us is incredible. It's just so beautiful. You can see the entire Milky Way. You don't even have to try to see it. It's just right there. You can walk around without any source of light when there's even just a sliver of a moon. So that's another thing that, unfortunately, a lot of people don't get to see. There are people growing up, there are kids growing up in cities these days that never really truly get to see the night sky. And we really need that as an ego check. We need it as a source of inspiration. It kind of goes back to our roots of being human, is using the night sky as a way to storytell, as a way to kind of understand our place in this crazy world and understand how much more is out there. So the night sky is very important, and it's becoming more important because we're losing it so quickly in cities. More than half of our country lives inside a city. So taking a trip just to see the night sky is a worthy cause for sure, in my opinion.
Thank you. And I'm pulling up a couple pictures now, just so you have an idea of what's going on our side. Of you had talked about it being a desert, of it being very dry, and with our students, when you go outside, there are a lot of trees. There are, there are broadleaf trees. There are some, coniferous trees, pine trees. We'll go pine
coniferous?
Trees. There you go.
Coniferous, yes.
Yeah, because apparently I want them to eat meat. And you have those as well. But I just think it's a stark comparison to what we see here, to where I am. There might be places in the state that you see some different things than we do, but we're looking at like a prairie with a mountain range behind it that is just flat, and there's nothing in it. And we have things around the state that look like that too, but they're all cornfields, right? They're all cornfields that have already been, that have been harvested. That's how we see that designation, and that is not what's going on in yours. It's some beautiful lakes, just incredible mountain ranges behind it. So one thing I will say about, I grew up in West Virginia, we moved to Iowa, we've been in Missouri, and now we're in Ohio. One thing that I really missed in the Midwest was topography. I really missed mountains and hills, and watching, almost it feels like the season changes depending on what height you're at, depending on what your elevation is. Going from a place where it's snowing and everything is, like you've got pine trees and everything's, just white and beautiful, and then coming back down where there's like a lot more green, and everything is, everything seems a lot more alive, and that's pretty in its own way too. Being able to have that dichotomy at the same time, right? And in Missouri or in Iowa, it never felt that way, because it is, or at least where I was very flat. So it's really neat to pull up these pictures and to take a look at just the vast range of elevations, and see that, like, okay, everything down here is flat, you got this waterway, and then you have a range, you've got pine from here to here, and then that stuff stops, right? Like, it is like done after a certain height. And then you've got a different sort of vegetation here, and then the mountain range, or the mountain tops, are just clear, and I'm going to pull up another one of those for another view of the same kind of cool features.
Yeah, we call them ecotypes. So whenever you're driving up a mountain or going from a mountain range into a valley, either way, when you see the plant communities change around you, that's what we call, they're changing ecotypes. So they're different groups of animals, different communities. And yeah, mountains are really cool for that, because at the base of the mountain, you're looking at something completely different than when you're halfway up than when you're at the top. And the plant communities dictate what animals are around too. So you'll know I can only find mountain lions if I go, up the mountain. I'm not going to find them in the valley. I'll find other kinds of animals down in the valley, but no mountain lions. So yeah, it's cool that there's such a range. It makes visiting mountainous areas really interesting because you can see a lot of stuff in a short distance.
So we've been on for about an hour, and you've given us beautiful pictures to look at, and I cannot thank you enough for taking us through what you do and how you got there and some of the paths that people can take. I know that this is one of those paths that I did not take. I do sit in front of a computer. I do work with people. I don't work with people face to face. I work with people over the internet now. I have been in a classroom with very young children, as young as 2, working on skills. But now it really is it's a remote learning thing. And so this is a very different path than what I've taken. And so I really appreciate you coming along to share that with us and taking out some of, I know, what is, your time off, because you work today, right? Because you said Monday and Tuesdays are your day off.
Yes, actually, I have today off because it was my 30th birthday yesterday, so I took a couple extra days off. But yeah, I typically do work on Sundays, you're right.
well, happy belated birthday. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Is it okay if students have questions, can I forward them to you? Can I email or send them to you for answers?
Yeah, I would love that. Please ask questions, guys. I would love that.
And would it be okay for me to share some of the pictures that you sent us as well? Maybe we can.
Yep, any of those.
Okay, awesome. So, guys, I will on the page for this once we on the watch extra episodes page, the archives. When I post this episode, I will add some of the pictures into it as well. And then if you have any questions, feel free to tweet them at us. Feel free to email them to me, and I will make sure they get it passed along. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Anytime.
Okay, everybody, have a wonderful weekend.